Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. One thing that I always forget to ask, which I'm going to do right now so I don't forget, is to invite you to like, subscribe, or follow along wherever you're listening. If you're enjoying the show, doing that helps ensure you get notifications every time a new episode drops. In today's show, I'm going to talk a little bit about Jupiter in Cancer. Now, I did recently give a webinar on Jupiter in Cancer where I went really deep into the meaning and the mythology and the symbolism of Jupiter in Cancer, as well as how to work with this transit based on your own chart. There's a couple of extra pieces that I think are worth also understanding about Jupiter in Cancer. And that's what I want to talk about in today's episode. So when we're looking at Jupiter in Cancer, there is a way of approaching that as a transit in terms of what might it mean for you. And that's what I really go into in the webinar. So if you missed the webinar and you would like that teaching, it is available over on my website, kellysastrology.com. That webinar is really rich, but it's also very accessible if you're newer to astrology. The concepts I'm going to talk about in today's podcast are maybe a little bit more intricate, a little bit more advanced. What I want to touch on is how Jupiter in Cancer is influenced by other factors, specifically Jupiter being visible, moving forward, morning star, etc., as well as how some of the other sign-based aspects that other planets will make that influence Jupiter in Cancer. I did cover this in a recent blog post, and I realized these ideas would make a great podcast episode as well. So that's what I'm going to explore in today's show. Now, as I mentioned, this does mean I'm covering some more involved concepts. I'll be talking about things like heliacal rise and phasis, as well as sign-based aspects. So they may be new concepts for you. They may be concepts that you're familiar with, just to give you a clue that that's where we're going in today's episode. So what I want to start with is one factor that I don't think we talk about enough in astrology, which is how a planet being visible influences its ability to be effective or its ability to influence events and experiences. So if we start by thinking about Jupiter being hidden or being visible, what we'll do is we'll take that standard Hellenistic definition of a planet being invisible when it is within 15 degrees of the sun. This is the kind of standard definition for a planet that is technically under the sun's beams and is hidden from view. Now, if we look at Jupiter from that perspective, regardless of the sign that Jupiter's in, Jupiter has been hidden from sight since around the 4th of June. And that is when the sun got to that 15-degree marker of Jupiter, and Jupiter kind of vanished from the night sky because it was so close to the sun that we just don't see things when they're that close. We don't see planets when they're that close. And Jupiter will ultimately emerge from the rays of the sun around July 15. And so that will happen when the sun then moves to the other side of Jupiter and starts to move away from Jupiter. So that period from June 4th to July 15, 2025, Jupiter has been invisible, has been hidden from sight, has technically been considered less effective and influential. When a planet is really near the sun like this, it is thought to be symbolically entering the sacred temple of the sun for purification, for renewal and rebirth, but it is out of its normal kind of place and not acting as strongly or effectively as it typically would. Now, while Jupiter was invisible from June 4th to July 15, Jupiter did shift from being evening star, where it was in the early part of the year, to morning star. And so once we hit this mid-July point, Jupiter will become visible again in the early hours before sunrise. So if you're up before dawn and you look east, you will see Jupiter just kind of as a bright light there before the sun rises. Now, If we go all the way back to ancient Egypt, this morning emergence of a planet was known as its heliacal rise, and it was considered to be a rebirth for a planet and for all that it represents. And so as Jupiter kind of returns to the sky after a period of invisibility, and we can think of Jupiter as being inaccessible while it was invisible, what we can see with Jupiter now returning to the sky is almost a return to or a reemergence of many Jupiter things, including hope, wisdom, faith, justice, integrity, and more. And keep in mind, those things were less available, or they were inaccessible from that June 4th to July 15 period while Jupiter itself was hidden. So what might this mean for you? It might mean that your attempts to grow and to expand, to explore new opportunities and adventures, or just to live with more integrity and generosity of spirit, those attempts will be more successful and effective once Jupiter has become visible again. So after July 15, for instance. And what we also have, if we look forward, so July 15 is an important marker in that visibility piece of Jupiter. And from July 15 until Jupiter stations retrograde, which is around November 10, we have Jupiter visible, moving forward at a good speed and increasingly effective now that it is made, or once it's made, its heliacal rise. And so technically what is known as this morning star phase for Jupiter will continue until November 10 when it stations retrograde. So if you've been thinking Jupiter moved into Cancer in early June and I haven't noticed anything yet, it may be that what is needed is for Jupiter to be visible. And so there's a particularly effective version of Jupiter that we have from mid-July to around the 10th of November until the station. Now, that's the heliacal rise, when we have a planet become visible again on that eastern horizon after a period of being invisible. And this first emergence of a planet coming out from the sun's rays gets a special designation as phasis. And this is considered a very potent omen. And so what we have here is a kind of developing understanding of that first heliacal rise being understood as an omen to watch, or as an appearance that speaks. And so around July 15, you might pay attention to events or encounters or ideas that are part of your experience then. They may be part of some of your personal auspicious Jupiter omens as Jupiter reappears. Jupiter rises as if reborn from the dead, if you like. And this is feeding in a lot of ancient Egyptian ideas about what happens to planets as they move through the sky and as they move in relation to the sun, their proximity to the sun. And so this kind of phasis, or this emergence, this appearance that speaks of Jupiter is something we want to pay attention to, because a topic or a thread or a possibility that kind of bursts into our awareness around the emergence of Jupiter could be really meaningful for you for the longer Jupiter in Cancer journey. And so this can provide some support or insight or even help and guidance around your experiences and plans of to do with the topics of the Cancer house in your birth chart, which of course is the sign where Jupiter is as it makes this appearance. Or it could generally feed into your understanding of how to improve or upgrade the topics of the Sagittarius and Pisces parts of your chart, which benefit in general from whatever is going on with Jupiter. So when we think about this July 15 reappearance or appearance that speaks of Jupiter, it might mean that you get a clarity of vision, or that you settle into a pathway that feels more meaningful and nourishing for you around then. It may be that inklings or ideas that pop into your awareness around mid-July act themselves like this illuminating flash of light that's clarifying and will give you confidence for the future. So hopefully now you're starting to think about Jupiter in Cancer through this lens of being visible or invisible, and understanding that even though Jupiter moved into Cancer in early June, there's a change in quality of energy that is considered to be an improvement or an increase in effectiveness around Jupiter that happens in mid-July. Now, even though Jupiter is going to continue through Cancer, the sign of its exaltation, until the very end of June 2026, we have a particular period where Jupiter is morning star, that eastern, more kind of there's a little bit more initiative in a planet that is morning star, and Jupiter will be morning star and direct in motion from July 15 to November 10. So just as a whole, I'm going to break this time frame down a little more for you, but as a whole, that is maybe the juiciest, most helpful time of Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter will still be able to offer support and affirmation while in Cancer after that November 10th date. But of course, it'll be retrograde. It'll be a different phase. There's lots of different pieces to Jupiter that will happen over this 12-month cycle. And this period from mid-July to early November, Jupiter is especially active. It's forward-oriented, and it's especially kind of in that spirit of growth and generosity. Jupiter will in fact remain visible from mid-July 2025 until about the 10th of July 2026. That is the next time that Jupiter will slip into the sun's rays and vanish from sight for a while. But by then, Jupiter will be in Leo. So if we're thinking about the best of Jupiter in its exalted place in Cancer, we're starting to narrow this down to this July 15 to November 10 window. And when we think about the visibility component, that's the window that we're looking at. But we want to layer a few extra pieces in. And if we think now about influences from the other planets, particularly Mars and Saturn and Venus, what we're starting to factor in now are the patterns or the aspects that the other planets will make to Jupiter in Cancer, especially just by whole sign aspect, because from the ancient Hellenistic approach of astrology, we did consider planets interacting with each other via sign-based aspects in addition to by degree-based aspects. And so these sign-based aspects from other planets to Jupiter in Cancer will influence the expression and the strength of Jupiter in Cancer. Some of them will affirm and enhance Jupiter in Cancer, and some of the planet aspects might act as distractions or delaying aspects that kind of reduce what Jupiter in Cancer can do for a period of time. So to start with, of course, there is going to be a period of time that Jupiter is in Cancer where Jupiter is dealing with a sign-based square from Saturn in Aries. And that is going to create maybe some restriction or to minimize in some way what Jupiter in Cancer can offer. And so the two time frames that Jupiter in Cancer is dealing with that sign-based square from Saturn in Aries, we have the middle of 2025 from May 25th to September 1st. And then again, we have a period in 2026 starting February 14 and running till June 30, 2026. And so if we think about when will Jupiter in Cancer be most free from those limitations or hindrances that Saturn might bring forward, we have a very particular window from September 1st to February 14. So September 1, 25 to Feb 14 of 2026, where Jupiter is in Cancer without that sign-based square from Saturn in Aries. And if we add that date in to the piece that we were just looking at, where Jupiter is direct, it's moving forward, it's visible, and it's in its morning star phase, we know we've got that until November 10. What we're really looking at is a period from September 1st, where Jupiter is in all of those great conditions, but no longer has the sign-based square from Saturn. So from September 1st to November 10th, 2025, we have Jupiter in Cancer, no sign-based square from Saturn, and we have Jupiter, of course, in that morning star direct and visible phase. So that period, September 1st to November 10, translates to a super useful kind of free from fear and barriers version of Jupiter in Cancer. Now, we can't forget Mars, because we know Mars can be a little bit like a fly in the ointment when we've got this beautiful placement of a planet. So we need to check in that time frame we're looking at, September 1 to November 10th, will we have Mars in a cardinal sign? And we will have Mars in a cardinal sign for a portion of that. So Mars will be in Libra from August 6th to September 22nd. And while Mars is in Libra, it's creating a sign-based square to Jupiter in Cancer. So if we factor that in and we narrow the date again a little bit further, just to account for interference from Mars, the most free from outside interference expression of Jupiter in Cancer in its morning star phase will run from September 22nd, once Mars leaves Libra, until November 10th, when Jupiter goes direct. So when we've got Mars in the mix, that's from August 6th to September 22nd, there may be some irritation or distraction that arise that takes you away from whatever growth or generosity or kind of advancement or adventure Jupiter in Cancer is trying to bring forward. It may be that while we've got the Mars in Libra, Jupiter in Cancer piece, you're navigating a little bit of tension, low-grade friction, maybe a difference of opinions. We know that Mars can be a little bit disruptive, or it can interrupt our rhythms and plans. So when we're thinking about like the most soothing, nourishing version of Jupiter in Cancer, we want to look for those timeframes when we don't have Mars or Saturn in another cardinal sign. And when we have Jupiter in this very effective, very active, very forward-oriented, progressive morning star phase, the timeframe we're looking at is from September 22nd to November 10th. So that is our best kind of period for Jupiter in Cancer. Now, if we think about will Venus be helping Jupiter in Cancer out at all, the time frame when we have help from Venus without interference from Mars and Saturn is from October 13 to November 6th. We will have Venus in Libra and Jupiter in Cancer. And squares where we have benefics involved are not problematic in the way that you might think of a square. So even a square from Venus or Jupiter has affirming, helpful qualities to it. And so a square between the two benefics, we take it. It's a beautiful aspect. And so that can add just some additionally supportive themes to Jupiter in Cancer for that few weeks from October 13 to November 6, where Jupiter has Venus on side, has an ally or a little helper to encourage and help it disperse whatever gifts and generosity it's trying to bring forward. So if we lay all this together, the visibility, invisibility piece of Jupiter, and we weave in Jupiter being forward and morning star, and then if we factor out the time frame where Mars or Saturn are in cardinal signs, we have our best period of Jupiter in Cancer from September 22nd to November 10th, with a little bit of an extra lift from Venus in Libra for an even shorter period inside that from October 13 to November 6th. So hopefully those dates have been helpful and exciting and interesting for you. I know that it's a lot of data, but I really felt it was important to flesh out our understanding of the different ways that a planet or a transit like Jupiter in Cancer will be more or less what we expect based on what else is going on in terms of its relationship to the sun and its visibility, and how the other planets are either supporting or maybe challenging and limiting its expression. So of course, these techniques you can apply to all kinds of other planets. Is Venus visible or Saturn visible or hidden? We can think about sign-based aspects that the sun might be receiving or that Mars might be receiving. And so you can certainly take these concepts and play around with them in your birth chart or to do with other transiting placements. So I'd love to hear what your experience is of Jupiter in Cancer. Is it something you've noticed that's changed since mid-July or around mid-July once Jupiter became visible again? So let me know in the comments below. It's always great to hear your experiences. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you are enjoying the podcast, please do take a second to like, subscribe, or follow along wherever you are listening. I so appreciate it, and that helps other people find out about the podcast as well. All right, team. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. I look forward to sharing more with you again real soon. Until then, take care.